Council order at 4:33. Thank you all for being here. This is going to be a little bit different of a meeting. So we'll get through. Hopefully everybody's seen the agenda. Like I said, a little bit different. The largest part of it is going to be this kickoff that we have before to go. That will be sort of discussing everything that they do, how they do it, and then what we're going to work with to do with our conversations. And then we'll have a little debrief on that. We'll get some staff updates, and then we'll talk more community event. So a little different, but I think a good one to start with. And it saved us from having to schedule another meeting to do this. So we'll start with the agenda, which I just went through. So I'll entertain a motion to approve that agenda if there are no other amendments to it.
I'll move.
By Trey and a second by Dr. Lang. All those in favor, please audibly say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Perfect. And then I don't think you have a copy of the February minutes, but I believe I emailed them out.
Yeah.
Okay. There are a couple of action items that still need to be followed up on there, but no amendments that I have. Give you a chance to think through, or if you have amendments for February minutes, let me know now.
I had a question.
Yes.
The amending the bylaws.
Mhm.
Second bullet point, motion to amend bylaws. First bullet point under that, clarified that attendance and absence section only applies to full board meetings and not to bylaws. Did that mean?
I'm sorry, subcommittees.
Not sub, okay.
Which line is that?
So that would be the second page under new business, the second bullet point, the fourth point, or the second point under that bullet point.
The first point under the second bullet.
There you go. New business, section 2, line 4. So it should read, clarify that the attendance and absence section only applies to full board meetings and not committee meetings versus not bylaws. That any other amendments? None. We'll entertain a motion when you're ready to approve the February minutes as amended.
I'll make a motion that the February minutes be approved as amended.
By Dr. Lane and a second
Seconded.
by Veronica. All those in favor, please audibly say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? Beautiful. Okay. I don't see any guests with us for public comment. So we are going to move forward with our city council update. Sorry we hid from you this month, but we're glad you found us.
Okay, I will always find you. It's I will find you. I don't have much this month. I did want to make a few notes. I have a lot of board meetings today, so I spend most of my time at all of my liaison boards, and a few of them are starting nomination committees. And I didn't know if I wanted to just pose that as a possibility on council. What I don't want that to turn into is people just being elevated and being placed on boards without the consensus and understanding of what you guys need. We may find names on a list and just say, oh, look, and it's my district, but it may not work for you. I don't know. We can always continue that way, but our Parks Board has just created a nominating committee so that there is a team that is looking through those applications and seeing what fits best within the board to then uplift. That doesn't remove the option of council nominating someone outside of that, but it gives you guys a say. So I just wanted to pose that if that's something, because I know, like you said, we had 7 on a board of 13. And as we go, I want to make sure that you guys always hit quorum, or that you are always there. We don't have to run into that. And if you guys being able to help decide the next members would be a benefit to you, then please, by all means, if that's something we can explore, let's explore that as well.
Can I ask a quick question about that before we move on? Because we talked about this in our policy committee meeting. What is your understanding of the process of if someone is like from your district that's missing from the seat on the board, how you select that person? Because we all had very different
It's
understandings.
very, okay, so boards and commissions, that's part of what we do, but remember, it's just a piece.
Mhm.
So sometimes when that comes, we're just looking through Granicus and I'm going, okay, where's the district E? And I'm going, and then I'm looking, will they serve? But I can't promise you that I'm always the best judge of that or that anyone on council. If it's a district seat, it's
Right.
me having to go through and look at all. Sometimes they aren't there. And so now I'm going onto my own network in the community, which doesn't always pan out, but that's in addition to everything else we're doing. So I cannot promise you that's at an efficient time. That's why nominating committees would be beneficial, because we can't promise that council is always going to have the foresight to do everything and give you everything you need in a timely manner, which may in the past on other boards has led to vacancies being outstanding for a very long time. So instead of frustration being towards council, these committees have been presented from other boards so that we can avoid the frustrating part. And then when we can't find somebody, if you're able to go, you know what, I know we don't, but these members would help out in this area, and we can get to that later. We can switch it up. That conversation would be really beneficial for us.
So that if we have, like for our application process that people do online, if we have a pool of applicants and again, use the example, you have someone missing representing your district, but not Nadia or Lance has 10 people that are in your district. Is it easier to give you those 10 for you to select from that have already applied and been approved through the application process?
That's an option.
Okay.
What the other boards are doing is that they're taking that and they're researching and looking at those applications on their own and saying, hey, because of this, we elevate these members so that you don't have to do the homework and go look through it. So you can give us that option. That doesn't necessarily guarantee that we're going to do it, but yes, it does. Like that is what we're going to do. So,
Sorry, I have one more follow-up
Go
question. I don't want to cut you off, but
I don't know, you're fine.
but I'm following that line of thought. So then would it be easier in that sense to have, like, does it make it easier or harder for you to have to nominate someone? Or would it be easier for whether it's the board or the departments, if they already select half of the people that are on the board to do that instead of you having to select them?
In your case, you have half the board that is already done by staff.
Right.
So that's already happening. If you're talking about just the district seats, then it would be great to have that homework done and helpful from you or staff. If you guys
Okay.
have that, the recommendation, if you are behind and it's my district and you're like, Christina, yo, first of all, tell me here so that I have some opportunity to do my own homework. It's not that I don't want to, it's just
Yeah.
falls to the bottom of the totem pole. Give me that opportunity to do that. And if I'm like, you guys, I'm struggling, I can't, then by all means, if whatever reason I'm not here, have staff make that recommendation and say, I know it's been a while. I think here's some candidates. Could you look at them? Or would you prefer that we pick it? Then we can say, okay, cool. Yeah, no, that sounds great. And we'll move
Okay.
forward. So that background, that backup would be really helpful. I don't want you to ever think that we are trying to hold all of the nominations and we want to do every single one. There are so many of you
Yeah.
that it gets a little bit cumbersome. And I don't want that to translate. Ultimately, this is about your work getting done, not about council picking people.
Okay.
So if that means that I need to let go of the reins and say, hey, take over because I can't do my due diligence, then please, by all means, take that over for me.
Okay. Thank you for indulging that
Yeah.
line of question.
The policy committee, and we've been talking a little bit in relation to onboarding and new committee members coming on. And part of that, I think if we're talking about community engagement, is how we promote or recruit. So I don't know if I ever see, except for the beginning, where we went out for an announcement, and it might even be on the website if you're interested, how we promote this, if you're talking about, so in your districts, I've never seen it really promoted by the council people, that you could see going out to their community and say, hey, we're looking for, and if you're interested, this is where to send. So I don't see any promotions like that.
So it's on my newsletter every month. So if you, but you're not in my district, so you wouldn't see that. But I cannot, it's not a rule. Yeah, for me, I'm promoting that and the free classes, but it's not a rule for council to do that. So the fact that I do it does not mean that it's a requirement for Corey to do it, or that it's a requirement for Jane to do it. That's the frustration, that our jobs don't have requirements. So
But
you're gonna see.
There's no consistency or uniformity minimum that at least each district is addressing similarly. So in other words, that each district can be different at the way they do that.
There's nothing that we can do to get that, because this job is ultimately, there are no rules. Like, there is nothing. I hold a monthly community meeting, but again, that doesn't mean that any other counselor has to do the same. So you're gonna inherently see inconsistencies with that. And in this case, that is what it is. But by statute, there's no rules to it. So I can't force any other council member. You can definitely bring it up. You can come to public comments, you can email your counselor and say those things. But there is nothing that you're gonna look that will get that uniformity that you're requesting. So what I'm trying to do is put that into your hands, instead of it being a council thing. If you're seeing problems that are not happening, let me give you that reign and that ability, so you can take that from us and help us better serve the board. Because ultimately, again, that's what this is about, the board. Yes, ma'am.
I have a silly question.
No, not.
Do you know who on council does monthly newsletters?
Jane Harrison does. What district are you in? Well, I would give him some grace. He's still new. So he's still only a few months old. So I don't think he does. I know B does. I know Jonathan Melton does. Jane, Harrison, and I are the ones that I know of. That does not mean that others don't, but those are just the only 4 that I know. Thank you. Great question, though. So please, if you want to follow my newsletter, is pretty good. It's awesome, just so you know. So go to ChristinaForRaleigh.com. It comes the first of every month, and it does include that. It includes links to sign up for Raleigh Neighborhood College and Citizens Leadership Academy. It includes links to sign up for boards that we're always looking for people. It has a lot of information, so please sign up. And then if your counselor doesn't, just forward them my newsletter and be like, hey, why don't you do this? This would be really great if you could do this, Mitch. Wink, wink. You know, but I'm just being silly. I'm not actually advocating for that. Another thing I wanted to discuss, we have pertaining to community engagement. You guys have already been talking about it's a comp plan coming up, and we had a big discussion yesterday in our work session, and then in our budget work session the day before, that I think are pertinent to your board, and that is transportation. Our 6 Forks Road improvement that we just approved last year, that went up from $33 million to $56 million. And we were like, oh my God, that's crazy. So we had to lower it, it's kind of lessen the scope, has now gone up to $93 million. So there is nothing that I'm asking you to, you can't change that unless you've got a check for $40 million. There's nothing really much you can do, but within what you guys do, and this is with your task, I need your help in communicating those whys. Why is this? Because that's going to be a huge thing from District A. So it's Veronica, that it's going to be your district. They and Stacy, they have every right to know the whys. And we talked about it in session yesterday, where I said, how can we be the frontliners so that when people learn and they're angry, they're justifiably angry, they realize it is not because staff didn't do their job. Staff is doing an amazing job, but with everything, cost increases, with tariffs, with all of this stuff, it is just outlandish, and we don't know what to do. That conversation will be coming up in May, where we actually have to have a really difficult conversation about that. I need you guys to pay attention to that conversation so that you can help me explain to residents what's going on. So that's what I see the board as, is when we have big issues, a comp plan, when you've got something like 6 Forks Road improvement and it's going up by double just within a year. How can you guys best utilize, how can I utilize you to best explain to residents when they come up, so it doesn't look like we're just pointing people in 10 different directions? Because I don't know how to get this information out there in a constructive way. Any questions to that? Yes.
I had a question. It's not related to 6 Forks, but it's more like Falls and News, because that's my side of the town.
Okay.
There's a lot of confusion about the work that they've been doing in Falls. Like it's still like jacked up. Are they making 3 lanes, or is it like sidewalk, or is that a question for is that a Megan Patton question?
So
Okay.
that's what we're learning here. How do we find out that information? It would be great if we all knew exactly who to just send all that. We don't always know. And so I would challenge you to make sure you're in communication with your counselor because she has amazing information. And she's been doing, if you follow her, she's been giving updates about that road work that you can help amplify. So that would be a great way to learn and to process and pass along that information.
Same thing with the Capitol Boulevard thing, right? I mean, it's talking about that a lot lately.
Yeah.
As far as maybe making like toll road or something like that.
Right. That again, the helpful thing which Megan will be able to guide you on and is the conversation she's already having. The first thing that I'll say to that is that that's a state road. And so the city has no say on that. That is a state decision. There are state roads, and that's a lot of our major thoroughfares, Glenwood, Capitol Boulevard, a lot of those are all state roads. So when the residents look at us like, what are you doing? And you're making, no, we're not. We're not making any of those decisions, nor do we want to. So let's make that clear. There is never an appetite where we want to now take control of Capitol Boulevard because that means that y'all's taxes are going to skyrocket because we're going to have, so we don't want it, but we may not be as good at communicating that aspect of it. So while you're talking about Capitol or Falls of News, and those are specific issues, if we best understand what those state roads are compared to city roads, then when somebody asks you that, you can be like, actually, the contact person is the state, and here is that. And Megan can help you with that as well.
Okay.
But that's a great question.
All right.
Anything else? I'm trying to think. I thought there was one more thing, but I forgot. So I'm gonna just leave it now. I won't take up any more of your time. But those, yes,
On the 6/4, you said that that conversation is happening in May.
May. Yeah, it'll be a work session, but I don't have a date. So when we find out, can you pass that along to them? Because they didn't give us a date. I remember the last one. The last one was another work session item that we had this week, and it was about separation allowance. That is a huge conversation, separation allowance. And what that is, I will give you homework. Go back to Monday's budget work session and please watch it. It is our firefighters asking for a retirement benefit called separation allowance, in which it would, after 30 years of service, it would pay 25% of your salary until the age of 62. And I just challenge you guys to watch it. It's a big commitment from the city to be able to incorporate that into our general fund. It is. Watch that. I'm not gonna give my opinion on it, but it is something that the community needs to see and they need to understand. Because these are our staff and these are people who are literally putting their lives on the line for us. And how are we showing that we honor that? And so there are different viewpoints as to why yes or no. And I'm not telling you to feel one way or the other, but it's another big topic of conversation that will affect the entire city as we go through this budgeting process. So we have another budget work session, which will go into stormwater fees, water fees, trash fees, and that's April. It's the second Monday in April, whatever date that is. And those are big topics of information that could really help us as we're trying to educate the community. So we had one in February, the second Monday, the second Monday in March, and then the same thing in April. So if you guys can look at those, help push those out so that residents know on a high level what we're talking about, the budget may not be as cumbersome when it comes up in May. Because you're going to have residents, that's going to be like almost a 500-page document that people are going to go, yep, not even paying attention. But that's where your money, that's where we're spending your money. So it's very important that they know. So just want to give you those tools. Those are the 3 things I wanted to touch on. If you have any other questions, I'm here. I'll be here until 5, but I'm always available, through email or phone. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay. We're 2 minutes of schedule. That's good. So hopefully everyone has gotten either email or you got a printed out version of these 2 documents. These were provided by Portico that we can use just to support documents as we move through this kickoff looks like. Here's the thing. I don't really know what to expect from this. I know that they're going to walk through, again, their process, what they offer, what they can do for us, support resources as we start building what our conversations are going to look like. But I do encourage you to ask questions because this is where the work of what we're going to do begins. So I don't want to leave this room not knowing what we're doing since we've got them here with us. And then after we're done with them, we can debrief about what our next steps are, what we need to do as individually, committees, as a board, all of those things. I'm going to turn it over to Nadia.
Yep, I'm pinning y'all so you can see. So, welcome Cortico folks. Thanks for hanging in there. So just wanted to introduce them. As you all know, we have been working really hard to establish a contract with Cortico. So they're actually gonna just kick us off and introduce themselves, their platform, and the great work that they've done and that we can do as a city, and community engagement board and community engagement department. So if y'all need anything from us, this meeting is being recorded. There's a couple board members not present today. So just holler, put a message in the chat. I'm checking things. And I'll let you guys take it over from here. You should be able to share your screen if y'all have anything. And thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, Nadia, for having us, and thank you to the board too, of course. My name is Ethan Walker. I'm the Programs and Partnerships Manager at Cortico. I'm kind of the project lead on this side of things. I've been working closely with Nadia for a while now to get this going. So I mostly just wanted to start by emphasizing how excited we are to be working with the city of Raleigh. We got connected through our friends at the city of Durham. And so that's something we'll come back to in a little bit. But our plan for today was really to just provide an overview of our process to help you get a sense of how it typically works, and then have you start thinking about how you'd like to maybe adapt that, or what might be the best way for that to work with your team. We're going to show you a little bit of our tools to kind of refresh your memory or give you a new look at some of our AI supported tools as well that are going to be part of this project. And then talk a little bit, mostly for you to start thinking about what next steps will look like. But as mentioned, we're happy to take any and all questions. This will be, some of this is going to be very new for some of you, and we're happy to answer questions as we can, or take them back if there needs to be some extra work done to figure that out. But to start, I'm just going to ask the Cortico team members that are here to introduce themselves. So I'll lead the way again. My name is Ethan. I mentioned that I'm Programs and Partnerships Manager, and then I'll just ask each team member to share one word that they use to describe what a great conversation is like. And so for me, the first word that comes to mind is open. And for all the board members that are here as well, I'd love to see maybe in the chat, what's a word that comes to mind for you when you think of what a great conversation is, or what it feels like maybe. Yeah, I'll hand it to V.
Hi, everyone. My name is V. Dow, the Director of Learning and Practice here at Cortico. And a really great a really great conversation leaves me feeling inspired. And I'll pass it over to Kelly.
Hi, everyone. It's great to meet you. My name is Kelly Paola. I am a UX researcher at Cortico. And I think the first word that came to my mind is connection, when folks can leave feeling a little bit more connected. And I will pass it to Kieran.
Hello, my name's Kieran. I'm a partner support lead, so like technical customer support. And for me, the word that for a good conversation would be complex. And I'll pass it over to Malcolm.
I'm Malcolm. I also work in technical support with Kieran. I am going to deviate from the format and say that I'm really excited about this project. I spent many years living very close to Raleigh in Durham. And I've spent a lot of time in Raleigh as well. So I'm excited to meet you all and for this project to start. But to get back to the format, I will say a word that comes to mind for like a high quality conversation would be easy. And I will pass it to easy.
Easy. Oh, okay.
And I'm going to pass it to Tevin.
Hey all, I am Tevin. I'm the front-end engineering team lead here at Cortico. Similar to Malcolm, I'm excited for this because I spent a large chunk of time in the Triangle area as well. And my word is rewarding?
I'd love to hear too from board members, again, thinking, about this project in the context of conversations and your role really as having conversations with community members and then up to the city council and other parts of the city. What word comes to mind for you in terms of what a great conversation is, or what it feels like, if anything comes to mind?
Communication.
Responsive.
Yeah, I like that.
Insightful.
Important. Freedom.
Those are all great. I really appreciate that. All right. So with that in mind, and sort of that feeling of a great conversation in mind, I'm going to share my screen and talk through a little bit about how we work. We're going to have a little bit of a exercise to help kind of build on that first activity of what a great conversation is like. And then again, we'll talk a little bit about next steps. So let's see if I can make this work. All right, let me know if you can see my screen. You should see a big Venn diagram. Okay, great. So Cortico is a nonprofit that, as you can see, is closely affiliated with MIT Center for Constructive Communication. And so really what that means is we have a shared mission, which is really about amplifying underheard community voices, and then also using tools like our platform, some of the AI assistant tools, and then a process for having really great conversations and understanding those to help build this, what we call kind of civic muscle or capacity for communities to have these important conversations, these conversations that help different parts of communities communicate with each other. So the way that this works in real world is the MIT Center for Constructive Communication, as you might imagine, does all sorts of different research, some of which, when it is ready to be out in the world and scaled with partners like the City of Raleigh, that's when it makes it over to our realm, and then our job is really to help expand that use of those tools and processes different parts of the world as well. So there are three main components to our process: talk, understand, and share. And so I'm just going to explain a little bit about what each of those entails. The first part of our process is about conversations, designing really great conversations that are open and moving and do all of the things that we that need to be done. So typically for us, that involves small groups, so about 4 to 8 people. These conversations are recorded, and they're recorded in order to help revisit those conversations and extend the impact beyond just the moment of that conversation. I think we've all probably had the feeling of when you've been a part of a great conversation, and then maybe a couple of days later or a week later, you're trying to remember exactly how that person phrased it, and that can be frustrating. So that our goal really is to help design great conversations and then give you tools to extend their impact. Part of the way that you extend the impact of those conversations is through our platform, which we'll show you a little bit more of in a minute. But we have a process that we call sense making, which is really about giving you ways to listen to, deeply engage with what people are saying, and then start to identify themes that are coming out of what's being said. So you can start to compare what you're hearing, what you're learning across conversations, and use that to accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish. So whether that's getting a better sense across different communities, what's happening, more clearly and succinctly share that with city council or other city stakeholders, this is the way that you kind of take that large amount of raw audio or raw conversation data and turn that into something meaningful. And the last step is that sharing. So we have a couple of different tools to help partners share out what they've heard. I'll show you one example or two examples shortly. But there are a lot of different ways that partners have been creative in sharing what they've heard. And so that really is the last step. We design everything that we do to really empower partners and also give power to the voices of participants that take part in conversations. So this is all really built around, again, amplifying underheard voices. And so we're really excited to see how you all work with us to accomplish that. So to give you a little bit more detailed taste of the process, we're going to do a quick activity. And this is based off of a question from the conversation guide from the city of Durham. So we're going to ask you to answer this. This is called the Mentimeter. I don't know if you've used this before. It's a way to kind of share in real time what you're hearing, but I would love one or two people to respond to the question. It's what's up on the screen. And then as those couple of people share their answer, for other people to join this page and start writing what you're hearing. What are themes that you're hearing, keywords, things like that. So can I maybe get one or two volunteers to answer the following question? We want to start by understanding your vision for the Raleigh community. And so what are your hopes for the city of Raleigh this year? Maybe share a story or an experience that helps explain that hope.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
I guess my hope for Raleigh would be that the homelessness is addressed. The homeless issue seems like it's getting worse and worse.
You guys all know how to use this Mentimeter?
No, I'm just typing.
If you scan the QR code. If you
Yeah,
scan
I'll
the
give you all a
QR
second.
That's what I heard him
Enter.
say.
Yep. And then if
So-
you put in the website and then the code, it'll take you to that and you can enter your.
I just used yours, so you're gonna have to come up with another one.
Yeah, I'll give you all a chance to join. And then I missed who was speaking, but you mentioned homelessness, and I'm just, if there's a story or an experience that you've had that helps kind of add some detail to that'd be really helpful.
I was speaking with a homeless guy I think it was maybe like 3 days ago. Like in my area, there's the same guy. He's there like every day. It seems like it's like a shift or something like that. It's kind of like he's there like in the afternoon. Pretty nice guy. I think he got laid off, and then he got sick, so he has diabetes. So I think he ended up pretty much just losing everything behind being sick with the medical bills, and he got behind on his house, and that was pretty much it. He said it happened in like 3 years, like a 3-year turnaround. That's crazy.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Does someone else have a hope for the city that they have, and maybe a story to go along with that? Looks like some people are sharing as well in here, which is great. So things like bike and pedestrian infrastructure, electric vehicles. Anyone else have a story that helps explain why this is a topic that came up for you? Or just an experience or things that you've heard from other community members?
So I would just throw out, in terms of housing, affordable housing, so that people who are housed aren't losing their housing because of gentrification, because of changes in the cost of
Assessments.
housing and assessments, tax, all that kind of stuff that really terribly affects Southeast Raleigh, where people have tended to live on the lower end of the pay scale. But that is what is leading to all of this unhoused issue, because people are losing where they could afford to live. And a lot of it's because of gentrification and the fact that people are moving to where homes are cheaper, but cheaper is a stupid word in Raleigh, because there is no cheap housing in Raleigh. So like I still have students living in my house because they can't afford to go live in an apartment on their own, or even together.
Thank you for sharing. I'm going to pass it to V quickly to talk a little bit about how what you're seeing on the screen and the steps you just took helped to preview what we call sense making.
Thanks, Ethan. Hi, everyone. Yes, so, it's one of the most interesting things about sense making is that we do use our tools to sort of engage with people, to think more about what their conversations mean. But at the end of the day, what we just did here, which is someone poses a question here, Ethan poses a question about hopes for Raleigh, and then people start piling in, they start engaging with each other. It turns out there's some similarity in responses, people start sharing stories. And the process for gleaning something meaningful or summative or bigger than all of that, it's a negotiated process that everyone in this room does all the time, except now we use technology. So I don't see the metameter anymore, but if what were some items that we notice or the group can agree on that seems to either float to the surface as, repeated, or if you see the, yeah. So looking at this, is there anything we could say about all these different responses, if you notice any connections among them? I know they're different topically, but it's even
I
striking.
see safety as an issue. I see housing as an issue. I see
Other means,
community.
like transportation, like
Community,
sidewalks,
yeah.
safety.
Yeah.
I would say these are all needs.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. And I'm sure if we gave you another like 5 minutes even, this list would double and triple. And what's so interesting about an extended conversation is it starts revealing certain themes. And if you can imagine a tool like this sort of sparking some discussion about what you see collectively as a group, our technology, it enhances this experience, and this experience we call sense making. So it starts with this premise that as people who are interested in others, invested in their community, whether you're community organizers or you are invested in your neighborhoods or you're a city employee, all that engagement is stuff that you practice the fundamentals all the time, every day. You talk to your communities, you organize groups, you absorb what is being told to you, you share that information with others. And if there is a formal process of analysis, sometimes that stays in the realm of people charged with that. They're researchers, they're social scientists, they're data analysts, there are people in your city government that are charged with doing that research. Now imagine what it could be if we opened that and divorced it from expertise, right? And the expertise is in just community knowledge. So the work that you do, going back and forth, listening, investing your time, talking to people, having people talk to each other, this could be enhanced with technology. So in Ethan's slides, you saw a snippet of some of our tools. So if conversations across communities are recorded, you can start breaking them apart, you can start seeing pieces within them. You can start seeing patterns between conversations among neighborhoods, among different people across time. So, and that's all powered by local knowledge and local leadership. And that, in a nutshell, that's what sense making is, and it's enhanced by our suite of tools. So I'll pass it back to Ethan.
Thanks, V. And just to sort of finish up this portion, and we want to make sure to leave time for questions, we're going to do two things. I'm going to hand it to Kelly to kind of give you a brief walkthrough of the tools that V is talking about for helping you through the sense-making process. And then I'm going to show what an output from this whole process looks like, which you may have seen before, because I'm going to show you the Be Heard Durham portal. So Kelly, I'll hand it over to you, and then I'll show my last thing, and then we'll talk a little bit about what comes next.
Awesome. Thank you. Give me 1 second. Let me just pull up my screen.
And feel free, as Kelly's pulling this up, if you have questions that are coming up, feel free to put them in the chat and we can revisit them when we're done, or just write them down. We're going to spend a lot of time taking questions if you have them. So feel free to share those however you'd like.
Is everyone able to see my screen? Cortico folks, can you see insights?
Yep.
Okay, great. Awesome. I should mention I also can't see any of you. So if you're sending me hand signals, just unmute and send me a verbal signal. Okay, awesome. So that was a really, I think, great grounding context, V. Thank you for just a little glimpse at that part of our platform where you would actually do this sense-making work. So everything that we do at Cortico is really centered around the idea of centering the human in all of our technology-assisted processes. So you'll hear a lot of that, but I'll kind of orient you for just a second to what you're seeing on the screen. So we're actually looking at the city of Durham's data right now that they collected in their conversations, and we're looking at just over 2,000 highlights. So they have quite the array of community voices, which is really wonderful. And so what you're seeing here, each of these kind of individual tiles is an actual highlight, something that was pulled out of a conversation in the Durham community. And then what you see along the right is called a code book, which is essentially a collection of all of these kind of, like V mentioned, these deeper, more meaningful kind of themes or insights that were extracted, pulled out from the actual community members and their voices. Codebook development is kind of a whole different piece of the process, that there's a lot of different ways that we've seen partners approach it and that we've worked with partners to approach it. But essentially the codebook is developed based on all of these highlights. Again, we have a kind of hybrid approach that combines a lot of human listening and discussion, kind of exactly like we just did, kind of sitting together and negotiating and drawing out meaning from what we all collectively and individually heard. But then also we have some really cool prototypes because of our partnership with C3 at MIT, where we can actually input some of that human element into an AI, which will help us expand upon the codebook and sort of act as another contributor to the process in a way. So codebook over here, and then what you see underneath each highlight are actually codes that have been assigned to that highlight, and that's the process that we call tagging. So tagging is essentially a way of sorting and organizing all of these highlights based on this codebook here, and I can scroll here. It is quite the lengthy codebook, as you can see. Essentially so that you can start to identify themes and identify patterns exactly like you were just doing kind of verbally. And so previously, this entire process was manual, creating this codebook and then also going highlight by highlight and tagging. And as you can imagine, 2,000 highlights, quite the lengthy codebook. It takes some time and some resources. So what we have done by introducing our AI tagging tool is not replace the human in the process, but essentially give you a collaborator in the form of AI who can help you make it a little bit more efficient. So I'll show you what that looks like. So you can already see that some of these kind of codes that are attached to each highlight have this little sparkle. And that means that it was actually suggested as a possible code that pertains to this highlight, like a possible theme by the AI. What's great is you can turn off AI suggestions if you want to keep the suggestions kind of out of your purview for the time being. But you'll also notice that some of these are outlined and some of these are filled in. Like I said, because the AI is just a collaborator, it's not taking over the process. It's essentially coming in and saying, hey, I think this code might fit here. And so it's up to you, the human, to discern whether or not you agree with that. The Durham catalog looks a little different than some of our others who use AI tagging because Durham started this process before we even had that capability. So their process looked a little bit more like manually tagging first and then using the AI to come in and say, hey, can you suggest what else might be salient in this highlight? Like, what have I missed in this process? So I'll also show you something else really interesting. So we have a highlight here. And if I click into this highlight and I have all of these tags that were manually applied, I also have all of these tags that the AI said, hey, this might be a good fit for something that should belong on this highlight. And instead of just using sort of my own discernment and reading the highlight, I can actually ask the AI, like, why is it that you think that this code belongs on this highlight? It's a little small, so hopefully you can see it, but the AI actually provides some information about why it suggested a specific tag. And all of this is based on not only the content of the highlight, which it takes in, but if you can see when I hover over any of these codes, the Durham team input definitions, like what does this code actually mean? When we say safe and clean housing, what does that mean to us? And so the AI is able to take that information combined with the voice of the person who is actually speaking their need in these community conversations, and then tell us like, hey, here's the reason why I think this would be a good fit. And that works for all of the codes that were suggested for this highlight all the way down. And then, like I said, instead of just being automatically applied, it's up to the human to say, okay, I think traffic safety actually does fit here. I can just click that checkbox and it's applied to the code. And you'll see, or excuse me, it's applied to the highlight. And you'll see why that matters when Ethan goes through the portal a little bit. And then one last thing that I'll mention is that we always keep the indication that even though this was applied by a human, it initiated from an AI suggestion. Really just trying to find ways to be really transparent about where AI comes into the process, but also making it really clear that the entire time the human is still in the driver's seat. I'm gonna uncheck that to not mess with their data. And I can leave this up on the screen for a second for any questions, or I can pass it back to Ethan.
Any questions just more specifically on what Kelly showed you? Again, we'll have time at the end to go through sort of broader, bigger picture questions, but anything more specifically on the technology that's coming up?
Do you have questions?
Should I wait to the end?
Is it, well,
Either
what
is
kind of
fine.
questions? Oh, there you go. Either is fine.
I'll just ask a question here. So just with the definitions that are provided, is that something that the community would be working on, the city of Raleigh would be providing, Cortico's provide, where are the definitions coming from?
Yeah, I can speak to that a little bit. And then if anybody from my team has something to add, it depends. It depends on how you want that to look. Often definitions come out of that kind of rich kind of discussion and negotiation process that you saw a glimpse of, where you come together with the team and review a highlight and sort of start to align on what it is that that code means to you in the context of the rest of your data. So we've seen them just come out of sort of deliberation among teams. I believe that I believe that with the AI codebook development, which again is like a kind of more on the prototype side from C3, but that we're able to actually prompt the AI to help us generate those starter definitions so that we can take those and partners can take those and say, does this make sense for my community, my understanding of traffic safety or of gun violence? So they're malleable. You can edit them throughout your process. And I think we see that a lot where you start with a definition and then as you go through and continue to tag, you realize Like, has this definition shifted? Does this need to be broken out into multiple codes, consolidated into one code? So it's iterative and usually out of some discussion. Okay, I can stop sharing and I'll pass it to Ethan. And yeah, if any other questions towards the end, I can always reshare my screen.
Thanks, Kelly. So the last thing I'm going to share is, so to recap with the process, right? Talk is the first step. You design a set of questions you want to ask the community. You hold those conversations and record them. What you just spent some time between V and Kelly looking at is the sense-making process. So how do you take all of what people have shared and turn that into themes that you can then apply back to conversation highlights? The last step is share, right? So you've done the work to understand what people have said, and now you'd like to share out. And so I'm going to share one version of the output. And so you may have seen this before, again, because this is the City of Durham's portal, and a portal is basically a website that helps to organize and share out to people that maybe weren't part of the project all that's been gathered throughout the conversations and sense making. So, for example, these different bubbles that you see here, each of these represents what we call a parent code. So one of the key themes that was in the code book. So what, the set of core things that were heard throughout the conversation. So public safety was a big theme in City of Durham, like also came up in our initial conversation, partnerships and collaboration. And what Kelly was referring to when she said that tagging allows you to help kind of share out at a more detailed view, this is what it refers to. So by doing all of the work to gather voices and then apply the different themes to each highlight, you can start to explore and filter by all of these different categories what's coming up. So let's say that you're interested in getting a sense of what people are saying about traffic safety. I can filter the whole set of 2000 highlights by all the ones that are referring to traffic safety. And because these conversations, again, are recorded, you can play people's voice and listen to what they've said directly. So just for example.
Stoplight. We also need additional speed bumps on, I know for sure, Fairview.
Hopefully you can hear that with sound, by the way. But again, it's one thing to say, to write on a Post-it note from a meeting, we need additional speed bumps on Fairview. But by asking questions in a different way based on people's stories and experiences, you get the whole context behind that quote from someone that maybe lives on that street or drives on that street, things like that. And again, through the work of sense making and tagging, you can do this for any of the different themes. And so you can also, if you're tracking things like what district you're from, filter it that way too. So you can more specifically get the information that you're looking for or share to other people that may need to hear what people are saying. There are a couple of other ways that you can share out what you've heard. We have a bit of a more report style way of sharing what has been gathered that still embeds people's voices so that you can do that as well. You can also share what are called standout highlights, so ones that are maybe particularly powerful, and you can kind of pull those out and put them on the front page. And you can also share out about who was involved in the process. In the City of Durham had some community members that also assisted with the process in addition to staff. And you can also explain the process for the whole project. And so this helps, again, to just build in that transparency. There's transparency built into every piece of this process, from just listening to people's voices directly to giving people access to the whole set of conversation highlights. But you can also explain how it all worked too, because as you can probably tell, this is not the most simple process in the world, although we like to think that it's made easier than maybe it might be otherwise. The last thing I wanted to share is another type of output, which happens to just be embedded on this site, which is called a medley. A medley is a curated set of audio highlights. So think out of hundreds of hours of conversations, if you have a particular theme that you want to emphasize, or you want to kind of capture at a glimpse what you've heard throughout conversations, you can put together maybe 3 minutes or so of conversation highlights that help kind of explain that. And so just as a different way of thinking about what an impact or what impact looks like from conversations, I'm going to play probably not the whole version of this medley, but I'm happy to share the link with you so that you can listen to the whole thing to get a sense of what the sort of end point of a project like this looks like. And then we'll open it up for questions and talk a little bit about next steps.
We definitely have a lot of needs, with affordable housing being one of them.
The downtown area where you have the 3 complexes that service the elderly and disabled, the only recreation park that I see down there consists of monkey bars and a little bit of stoops to sit on, but it doesn't give you an area where you can run and play.
You see a lot of moms pushing their babies, and they got to push them in the street, but you got sidewalks going halfway down Austin, but none in the neighborhoods.
It floods so bad in our neighborhood, especially when we have a lot of rain.
So I have a seeing eye dog, and I also have my cane, and I use it. I wildly swing my cane up and down as I cross, and I pray to God every time I cross, because the newer cars don't make any noise. And in downtown Durham, they put in these crosswalks that are pretty, but they're not clear, and I think a lot of drivers don't understand what they are.
I always hate pausing in the middle of this, but I do want to also be conscious of time. So I'm going to share the link to this portal. Again, it's a totally public site. So if you want to dig into this any further, again, the reason we've shared all of this for you is to kind of get your imagination going about what this could look like in Raleigh. There's a lot to which, or this all really revolves around what you're interested in making out of this project. What are you interested in hearing from residents? What do you think needs to be heard in other parts of the city? And so that's really what we're looking forward to working with you all on. The 2 pieces of paper that you, I think, have in front of you, I think we can go over that once you form. It sounds like you're going to form a kind of a committee within the group to start working on this. Those 2 documents you gave are to give you a better sense of what the process looks like in a bit more detail. So what are the different steps? And then there's also a planner, which helps you think through some of the big planning questions that we like to ask partners to think through. So who are the voices, or who are the community members that maybe are underheard in the community? What might you like to know? Who should hear them? Things like that. So I want to make sure that we've got lots of time for you all to ask questions about anything. So I think I'll wrap us up there. But again, happy to take any questions about anything we've shared so far. Dig into any of the visuals that we showed you. Again, really excited to start working with you, and happy to take any questions here or offline as well in the chat if anything else comes up later.
Yeah.
Does the air conditioning sound really loud to you all?
You can kind of hear it, but we're able to hear you fine.
Okay, sorry about that.
It's all right.
The one question I had, and you mentioned this, the underheard, and it sounds like you're going to say a little more about that, but how do you determine or identify who is underheard?
Yeah, it's a great question. Cortico, it's not really our job to define who's underheard. It's really a core part of our approach is giving the tools like the platform and skills like learning how to do this process to people like you to then to apply your knowledge of the community. And so really it's up to you to determine who you want to hold conversations with. I think the concept for underheard for us as Cortico is more of a mission or like an ethos for us. We know that there are standard ways of engaging communities. And we also realize that not everyone is able to join those forums. And so this is another way to reach community members that maybe you're not hearing from, or but yeah, the definition of that is really up to you.
So I'm curious in this process could we go to a community, go to someone's home and do this kind of thing? Sometimes people might be more comfortable and more trusting to come to someone's home that they know, or to a personal space as opposed to a city facility. And I don't know if that's yes, for the conversations.
Yeah, I know that it's 6 to 8, right? That's like the recommended size of the conversation. So if whoever's hosting is comfortable having 6 to 8 people in their house to make it a more comfortable conversation, and that's what y'all want to do, I think you have the liberty to shape and make this whatever you think is best. But yeah, go ahead, Ethan. Sorry, I kind of cut you off.
No, I'm glad you went first. From our perspective, we love the idea of conversations taking place in places they may not typically be hosted, right? So one of my favorite locations from the city of Durham, they have I think it's a crochet group at the senior center, and that's where they had a conversation, right? So we love the idea of partners being creative about how you engage community members to make it more accessible for them to take part in these kinds of conversations. So yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I'm glad, Nadia, that from a city perspective, that sounds good too.
I hear it, Nadia.
Yep. Go ahead.
Okay. So before we, I guess, have the actual community talk sessions, are we already determining like what type of information we want to be highlighted? Or is that something that we decide after we've had the conversation? It's a two-part question. That's the first one. And then after we've had the talk sessions, what is the turnaround for getting a finished publishable product? Okay.
Yeah, good questions. So before you host the conversations, the really the main step is to, I would say, figure out what questions you want to ask. And so sometimes that can be more specific in terms of information that you gather. Questions can be really broad. They can be like the one that we did earlier in terms of what's your vision for the community? What do you see as the biggest challenge facing the city? It can also be much more specific. Again, we often use the sort of follow-up question of asking for a story or someone's experience as a way to add something more concrete or tangible. So you might have certain, if there's like a community plan that has specific kind of strategic pillars, you might use that as a way to guide the types of things you want to ask about, but not necessarily. We have a workshop that will help whoever is on that committee think through those different types of questions they want to ask, but that the sort of pre-conversation work is about determining the types of questions you want to ask, and then the sense-making process is kind of categorizing and organizing what you've heard. So hopefully that answers that first question.
Is the categorizing a us thing or a you guys thing, or is it a collaborative thing? I guess that's what I was wondering.
Yeah. So again, our main role is to provide the tools and the skills, and then the work of we have a workshop that will help introduce how to come up with a code book, for example, but the work of finalizing what the actual codes will be, that's on you to decide. And again, this comes out of the idea that we're not consultants, right? You're not handing over the community engagement to us to do on your behalf. We're providing you the path to apply the knowledge and the community understanding and the connections that you have to kind of create an output and a set of data that's most relevant to your community. The second question you asked was around turnaround time. And I hate to give the answer that it depends, but it does kind of depend. It depends on how many conversations that you hold, how you split up the work. So it sounds like you're going to have a team of people that helps to kind of spread the load. The steps that you'll be doing are hosting the conversation itself, highlighting the conversation, so listening to the conversation again, reviewing the transcript, and pulling out the sort of substantive answers that people provide, and then doing the work of creating a set of themes and applying those themes back to each highlight. So, if each person is taking one conversation, for example, you might be looking at, a few hours of time individually, but there's also a back and forth process. So I'd say a realistic turnaround time from after you've held the conversations can be as short as a few weeks to a few months, depending on kind of how in depth you want to go, how much back and forth there is, and then also stuff just like the work of putting together a portal that just takes a bit of time. So it's not a very specific answer, but it's hard to be overly specific at this point.
No, that answers it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
A question about technology. So when we're doing the recordings, is there like is there a standard for the device that's used to record the conversations, and then where does that go? Are we responsible for uploading those recordings somewhere? And what does that process look like?
Yeah, Kieran, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, our platform automatically transcribes things, but you would have to upload them. And the short answer is everyone's phone is likely a good enough tool, or if you have one of those handheld recorders, truly anything that allows you to record is good enough to upload to our platform. And you can upload to our platform like on any browser kind of thing. It's like a web app. And the other thing that I would say is we also have the ability to record directly to our platform, but like we just said, like some people are not interested, will feel more comfortable having conversations like in their home or somewhere where you don't have like necessarily consistent internet access. And so I would say, yeah, you could record it even directly up to our platform, but only in a place that you would feel confident about having like consistent internet access the whole time. So I always like, as a former like audio person, say like recording on your phone is better than enough, as long as you're kind of like close enough to everyone's voices. We also have like a help desk that has like best practices for how to like have a good quality in-person conversation that give like some tips and tricks on ways to just make your audio quality a little bit better. But honestly, like phone quality audio is perfectly fine. We even have people who record just Zoom calls and upload the audio that way. So any normal way that you would record anything works for us.
I have a sort of a backward question, and I mean this so that I understand simply, not to sound like a jerk, but aside from the platform by which we're able to upload these conversations to create thematic portions of the conversations to report out, aside from that portion, what else do you provide? Because I know that we've had a lot of conversations on what we want to do, what we want to see, how we want to formulate these things that have been a little bit halted because we were waiting for best practices or support from you guys. So that we're clear as we enter this, what do we get? What do we not get? And then at what point do we start this process on our own and then ask you for support on different portions of it?
Sure. So alongside the platform, we have workshops that basically help walk you through each step. So conversation, the first one would be conversation guide design. So again, that's V and then Kim, our other learning and practice team member, helping you think through the types of questions that you want to ask. Again, there's a methodology for us that's built into that question design. And then that continues through each step. So best practices on facilitating conversations. You'll then work with Kieran and Malcolm on learning how to use the platform, with V and Kim on determining the themes. So really we're here as a support for you as a team, to learn the different steps and how to use the tool. And that includes sharing, a lot of materials and best practices for taking what might feel like a slightly different approach to the kinds of community conversations you might already be having.
And then in that process, are we on a timeline that we direct, or is that based on, again, any best practices that you provide, or is it like, hey, we're ready, can we schedule the workshops? And it goes sort of at our own pace.
The pace is really determined by you. We're happy to work with you if you have a particular deadline that you have in mind and kind of work backwards. That's really where my role is. I'm more of a project management standpoint. From there, we also can set up kind of regular check-in meetings if you want to kind of move things quickly and stay up to date with, or keep us up to date. But really the timeline is driven by what you're all able to do. And we know that you're all busy people. And so this is part of the process of getting started, is figuring out what's a reasonable cadence, what's a reasonable time frame. And then we're here to support you kind of as needed.
I've got another question because I don't know anything about what the contract looks like or anything, but are each of these additional conversations with y'all, is that an additional price to what?
Yeah, so 6 conversations come with the contract. And so that's part of it. Also the workshops.
All the workshops are
technical
included?
assistant.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like a whole package, kind of like a starter package. And if we wanted to add more conversations afterwards, we would just have to amend the contract and add and pay for those additional conversations. Did I answer that correctly, Ethan?
Yeah. And I'll just say that, like, from the advising side of things, like, conversations with us are much more open. So we want to have active communication with you all. And then if you, like Nadia said, if you hold your 6 community conversations and then want to add to that.
And what's the length of time for the contract? Because what I'm hearing is the workload on the front end is going to be pretty hefty. And I think some of us are coming off the board. So that's a short period of time, and the disruption can be a whole nother thing.
Yeah, we were not expecting it to take basically a year for us to get started as life. But it's a year, so they have 1 year kind of getting us started, and then after the dashboard is created, is that correct? Sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's a year.
Yeah, and I'll say that the renewal is much lower. Again, we kind of understand that there's a learning curve to this. And so really the goal for this first year is to get you all up to speed and feeling comfortable using these tools in this process. So yeah, we really emphasize that first year is a year to learn, and try to make it really easy to extend that time frame if needed.
When did that year start, Nadia?
It starts as soon as we upload the conversation or just kick off.
Yeah, so the timer hasn't started yet, and you'll have lots of time. So
yeah,
don't worry too much about that.
I think my only worry is that, for several of us who've been involved for a while, we'll be coming off. So, how do we mix our committee so that we don't have like a chunk of the committee falling off in July?
Yeah, that is a dilemma.
We'll work on it.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll figure it out. The thing is, I'll still be here.
I think this involvement in the process, and the one in Durham, they have some staff people involved with the community. So the staff support was maintained throughout that process. How long did they start that process, and they're still using that process?
Yeah, so the city of Durham, their approach with with us is a little bit unique in the sense that they took a much more like institutional adoption approach. And so they're sort of ongoing. They're continuously adding more conversations. They're adding to their code book, and they're updating their portal right now. And so they started working with us, I think, almost 3 years ago. It's been a combined effort between staff members and then a few community members as well that help with the conversations and the sense making. So it's collaborative between community members and staff, and it's ongoing. I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, because this tool that our committee, our board looked at developing for use by the city and the community. So it is something that probably as a model, as it develops, hopefully other staffs would look at this tool and how it can be used. So that's a broad look at it, not just for this committee, but something that, because community engagement is a big issue, and getting the results of community engagement and see that has been a real challenge, that let people know they've been heard, you know. So it gives us better perspective as we talk about this, because when you have people coming and going, that's going to be a challenge, but you have to have some stable force that can keep directing things as people come and go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I know you guys all mentioned like potentially paying someone to be our facilitator. Like maybe that's the person who gets, trained on how to use the platform and proceeds to workshop stuff, and maybe that community member could be one of y'all who are rolling off and you get paid for this. I don't want to talk about it because it could be conflict of interest. I would just have to first figure out. But for me, that sounds like a solution to the potential folks rolling off the board. Yeah, 1 year as soon as the first audio is uploaded. That's when the clock starts, I guess. But like Ethan said, and thank you for being flexible. Yeah.
Well, like you said,
to take off, and my hope with that we would have been done by now, but that's not the case. We're dealing with what we got.
I have one more question. Yeah. Is there a mapping component, like where you're mapping where all the conversations happened?
Sort of. It's not in the GIS sense of like you can specifically pinpoint, but two areas that you can track location. When you upload a conversation, it asks like where the conversation took place. And as I really briefly showed you when showing the portal, for example, in the city of Durham, they track for each conversation which district it took place in. And so there are ways within essentially tracking a demographic of a conversation. You could track it that way, so you can filter the conversations by a particular area. I know that something the city of Durham is doing too is, and this is getting a little bit into the weeds, but you can also create codes that are what are called structural. So they're essentially like internal facing. So if every time someone mentions a particular street, like in that highlight I played, if you wanted to get really into the weeds, you could track mentions of certain locations, but it's not like a GIS map point, like putting it on Google Maps or something like that.
And we talked about, this is more internal, but we talked about this maybe before you joined the board, Dion, where the city of Raleigh has a sort of GIS tool that they use for community engagement surveys as well, called public input. And so we demoed public input to see kind of how it compared, and talked briefly about using that based on what the function of Cortico could do, but using public input to help identify places that were under engaged in, like geographically, or never really engaged historically, and using some of those as locations where we either have those conversations or making sure that we cover, if we don't get any people who are interested in participating in these community conversations, making extra effort to engage them so that they have the opportunity to. So there's like a geographical component that we can do kind of internally that will support these conversations, which will only further support what they can do as well, and what the themes are that are picked up. that make sense?
I think, yeah, just as long as we can create a visual that is like like what you're saying, like in a particular location. And like he was saying, that also kind of highlights how often a thing comes up. I think that would be really helpful for people to see.
Can you point to any other outputs, like actionable outputs that you've seen in your work, whether it's different cities? I know we've talked a lot about Durham, but other cities, other companies that you've worked with that are beyond the reporting. So is it like this reporting helps lead to a resolution that goes to X, Y, and Z, or that starts a project or a plan for that company or group?
Sure. I will put in the chat just a link to our partner case studies, but a couple that come to mind off the top of my head. And we worked with a consultant in the city of Boston on a transportation infrastructure redesign. And so the conversations that were held as part of a much larger engagement project, they helped inform what ended up becoming a $40 million policy that redesigned this particular roadway in Boston. We've also had a couple of projects around using community voices to inform a hiring decision. So a city manager, a police and fire commissioner. So those are a couple that come most directly to mind. But again, the output stage is really where there's a lot of room for creativity. Because again, right, at the end of the day, you're working with us to gather community voices and stories and figure out how to share them. And so there are all sorts of different ways that process can apply to decision making, to bringing communities together that may not typically come together easily. We work with journalists. We work a lot with youth and education. So there are a lot of different avenues that our work has been used, but the outcomes are really driven by what you're trying to achieve.
And then are those amendable as we go through the process? So say we want something that does have like the medley component that you mentioned that's kind of more of on like, I would say like a marketing side of what we're doing, like tells the story a little bit more, but then we want more data specific that's going to go to a report that we give to city council or that's used somewhere more tactically down the line. Is that something that we can amend in the process, or do we have to kind of state those outcomes that we're looking for at the beginning?
That's definitely something that tends to shift over time. I mean, there are certain things like developing a portal takes a fair amount of work. And so the earlier that you decide that you want that, like, I think that's already part of the contract, for example, but like, the earlier that you have an idea that you'd like to pursue certain things, the better. But it's very common for some of these plans to shift over time as you get more and more familiar with the process and the tools.
Okay.
Most of it on our end is, are we providing you a workshop or some additional advising, and then what you all do with the tools and what you've gathered tends to be more what the action component after the outputs is more driven on your end.
Okay.
I'll also just say on my end, because I do technical customer support, our platform is really good at helping you along the way to like figure out what's important and what you're hearing in the moment, and kind of like the process of sense making is involves quite a lot of listening, like actual listening. And so like you might have very strong ideas about what you want your output to be, and that's really great, and we support people there. But it sounds like in this group that you're like wanting a little bit of flexibility, and like in a little bit of like needing to make that call about halfway through or at some point during this process. And at least on the portal side of things, like we are working right now with the city of Durham to change their portal to kind of like a second version that helps them almost be like a directory for other city employees, in addition to showcasing the like engagement projects that they've done. So there's a certain amount of flexibility. I think we're a small nonprofit, so we're mostly just here to like meet you where you want. And like what success looks like for you. We're here to like help you meet that as best as we can, is what I would say. And our tool, I think, does a good job at meeting you there as well.
Nadia, I want to be conscious of time too. I know you probably have other things on your agenda, so
Yes,
you know,
we are at time.
okay. So I'll put my email in the chat again. We'll be talking plenty, I think, in the next couple of weeks and months. But again, really excited to be working with you. These are all really great questions, and yeah, this is exciting to get started, and glad we had the chance to connect today.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank y'all.
All right. Sorry about the air conditioning.
Oh, wow.
I really I didn't realize it was like so loud.
Okay, quick debrief. Does everybody understand what Portico does? I feel like I spent a lot of time talking about that one. Yeah.
Okay, I just, like, my final question was, I just want to be clear, like, any of the data analysis that happens, that we're doing that. They're not doing that. They're just providing a tool that sort of organizes data.
I think both are true. So we are doing some of it in that we can define what comes out of that AI analysis. So like they were talking about the definitions of community or safety. If those things come up and there's an AI generated response, but we have something we want to construct what that looks like, we could change some of those things with like a human element to it. So I think there's some of that we're doing, as far as I understand. Then the other side of it is literally using tools to synthesize all the information, create those themes, and then build what we want on our dashboard, whether it's voice recorded, you know, the examples they gave, or charts, graphs, whatever, those themes, how they worked.
And we're doing it.
That's their
We're doing
job.
that. Okay.
We don't do that. But everything in the beginning of the process, I think we're responsible for.
So they're a tool, but they also have the capacity building component of it, of like training us how to use the tool and best practices on conducting the community conversations. And then also help us with the output and telling the story and summarizing everything.
But we are not doing that.
Yeah. AI will be our best friends.
So it sounds like, to me, correct me if this is not the impression, it sounds like to me where we were waiting for a timeline and a process from them, we are to create what we wanted given to them to start our process as we want it to go.
Well, they built it along with you.
It didn't sound like that though. It sounded like a lot of, we're here to support you, but you tell us what you want. And we were like, but we don't know what we want because we haven't done this before. And then they said, well, we've got workshops. So then that's where I'm like, so we have to create the timeline, we have to schedule those things, then we have to create the things based on the workshops that we have with them. And then we go in those steps to create the conversations on our own based on their best practices. But from that point on, it's what we decide.
Correct.
That's what I understand. And I'm saying, tell me if I'm wrong or if I've heard it wrong.
First time. I think it's quite obvious as a board, you can't do this without staff support. So there's got to be some commitment from city council and staff to maintain a certain level of consistency and oversight because of the coming and going of the board and being volunteers of the time. So the quality time and development of what we would deal with has to be looked at on how that's going to look, because if we only meet once a month and a subcommittee meets in between, and like you said, this front load is pretty heavy. So then there's the workshops, there's training that they want to get people involved. So you're looking at a lot of that could be a lot of time to just get to the first question. But again, it's a model for the city to use, not just this report. So that's broader than that, because this adds to what the city is doing. And if this tool works, you know, from what I've seen, like the CAF that y'all use, but the CAF at the meetings is similar to this, where they have people rotating from tables for a small group of people, give them a question, they give the input, a few minutes, and they move on. So, you know, a lot of that stuff goes that way. And so I think we have to look at that model and look at what is actually that we can do. So that whatever we pick to do, we can be successful. You know, and that's as we look at this. But it's a good model that needs to be developed, but we have to let the city and staff know that it's not going to just be left, you know, with a board.
I'm going to disagree with that pretty heavily because we are the ones that asked staff to take this on. And not just staff, and I don't want to overspeak, but we didn't just ask staff. This was a huge, beyond what we understand, momentous ask for the city to allow. And that came from us. It didn't come from the department. This was also an initiative that we pushed for specifically with Cortico. So staff has done a great job of advocating on our behalf for something that the city didn't really want to do in a technical and safety support sense. That was their job.
Yeah.
We developed this. We decided one way that we're going to make impact is by having these conversations. And I'm not speaking this to you.
Yeah, right.
In general, if we didn't want to do this work, we shouldn't have signed that contract. So I think we are responsible for stewarding this work for the most part, and things that we can ask for support from, whether it's scheduling when these workshops are or having conversations about how we build what this framework is going to look like. I understand. We did this
Yeah.
to ourselves.
Well, again, you don't know what you don't know.
I will also say, you asked about commitment, like the city is paying for it, right? We've taken our time to help facilitate this process. We're not just gonna say, all right,
Yeah, right.
y'all go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
You know, like we're gonna be with y'all the whole time. We are your liaisons. We're gonna support y'all wherever you need support. So
We cannot ask you, hey Nadia, can you make this framework for us or help us make this framework and then come and we'll talk about it and make a
yeah, we
decision.
can't do it all for you.
Right, just because we're volunteer and you're paid, this is a paid portion of your job, not your job to do on behalf of the board. That's my opinion.
I got the feeling from just their engagement and welcoming of input, a collaborative process, that if we did need help, it would serve as a sounding board for that, not just the workshop, but really V and Kim were the two folks that really seemed to, we will be interfacing a lot. And that we could say to them, hey, you know, what does scheduling look like? How much of a turnaround? How long are these conversations? How did you reach out to what, you know, for maybe some examples of templates of things like that, just to kind of go off of. I think that they could provide us with, you know.
Yeah, and they're definitely a resource. Like they've done this with other cities. So
Not
there
just
are
here's a
best
workshop.
practices and there are examples and templates we could use. So there's no like reinvention of the wheel. Like the wheel has already been invented and we could use that to our advantage.
I think just something, I don't know if this really, I mean, it's related to it, but I'm just thinking about our purpose for this. What is it that we're hoping to gather from folks? And for me, I think it's important that we don't duplicate conversations that are already happening with the World Cafes, the comprehensive plan that's going on, and the community survey that went out in 2022, 2024. We're still waiting on the results, but that we fill a gap, but that it will be a value add to some things that have been presented to council that they are continuing to grapple with, something that across staff departments, perhaps community groups that have interfaced with, to really look at our community broadly, and where can we fill some gaps with 6+ conversations with a very small group of people. So we're not just asking the same questions that are already being asked, but then it's something that is of value. To me, I agree with you, Dr. Lane, that the lens of its future utility for the city, for the council, for other boards. I don't know, those are some of the things that I'm thinking about before we even begin this process.
Yeah, I think that has to frame, I think part of that's come up before, and some of it was in the form of what questions are we asking and why? Or are we having a conversation and letting the themes and the inconsistencies come out on their own? So one is more kind of leading and one is more organic, but which is more important and what we want to build these on. So that's an open question. That's not something that's been decided. And to Dr. Lane's point, I think one reason I want to get this right is because one, I think it needs to be made a point that this type of dialogue is important. Like coming, no shade to council if you're watching, coming to council, city council, and leaving a public comment and not getting any response, to me, is not the way that makes people feel heard in the way that this will. And so I think one reason I want to get it right is because I think it's an important way to show, it's important to show that this is a vital way to sort of engage with the public, but also, yes, the city paid for it. You should be paid for this. This should be a continual investment. And I think if the more right we get it on this, the harder it is to say that it's not useful. And the less reason they have to say they should continue using something like this, because it should be. I think they should use this for council meetings. And that synthesized information in public comment. Like, I think that's been my secret hope for this all along personally, but
Me too, and with the emails that are sent in, submissions, and the voicemails that are sent in, and the in-persons, and
and you're not just shooting blindly.
Question, maybe just of you, but also of like, it's a question we all should ask ourselves and answer. What does getting it right look like to you?
I think framing from the beginning what we want to hear, and that's part of do we want themes that we come up with to hear more definitively how people feel, or do we want to hear what people have to say in general? I think that's an important part of it. I think the timeliness of it, not letting it take a year for us to do. I think whatever the outputs look like. So if we create a website that has a lot of this information, the recordings, things like that, but also what's reported to council, I think those are like the three main, and people's feedback, maybe. How they feel that they experienced the whole thing, but also what was done with the information. So
Yeah.
I want it to look good, be done well, have outcomes that we can use, and to be done not quickly, but like efficiently.
And are we hoping to create a model?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
Yeah.
to me, I don't know if that, like the board, I don't know if that's the board's, but I think we can do a good job.
Yes, and we'll be here to make sure you do.
Yeah.
I do want to be mindful of time. Do you want to figure out who wants to be part of that committee, or who's actually going to take this on? Is it going to go specifically to a committee? Is it going to go to like an ad hoc group? What's the next steps?
So each of the standing committees is responsible for some aspect of this work, which we outlined in our work plan. So like, I can't remember the others and y'all can help me, but like policy is responsible at least for one portion of proposing moderators, like having the discussion about maybe what we're looking for, any recommendations we know of from our circles or beyond that. And then kind of constructing, is that paid? What do we want them to do? How do we incorporate them? All of that committee is responsible for. So each one has a portion of that that I think helps with the continuity. So even if we're all gone from the board, not life, even if we're all gone, there's still a task that each committee knows they're responsible for. As far as like creating a smaller committee within the board at large that's going to continue the work, that's interested and is willing to add the time, I think that will have to be an ad hoc committee.
Are we going to try to establish that right now, or we want people to kind of think about it?
I think, I mean, if you are interested and willing, I think that's fine to say now, and I can send an email out to solicit the responses of people who are not here, just to make sure. And I think it is worth saying, honestly, that it will be a heavy lift. I think that lift will be heavier in the beginning as we have conversations about defining what we're doing and why we want to do it and questions we want to ask and how we make sure that this happens long term. But again, I just think it's important.
That might be a good question to bounce off of them to see when Durham was setting this up, did they have a subcommittee that really, began the process, reviewed, discussed, gathered some structure, presented some structure to a larger group of decision makers?
And now
But and if also if what their time commitments for something like that is, like if you have a group of, facilitators that are going to be trained, how many hours is the training? If you're going to have a group that does the scheduling, how many hours are anticipated? And what were you going to?
I was just wondering if Durham's partnership with Cortico was staff initiated or board initiated, like that makes a big
I
difference.
think we're like the first board that has initiated this, so.
It says their data consultants were contracted community members and a bilingual consultant to analyze and organize the themes. But it doesn't say specifically like initially where it started from. But it does say the City of Durham's Community Engagement Division supported the conversation. So it sounds like you said, it wasn't a lower entity, but like a smaller entity that did it. I think it sounds like we're one of the first. It was more city or larger organization led.
Would it be, for me, it sounds like it would be helpful to get, maybe there's a contact that was part of that lead team.
We have the Durham. Yeah, we've talked to them a couple times.
Okay, so once they got to this phase, what did they learn and what would they suggest, recommend? I don't know, just kind of help guide us so maybe we can avoid some,
I don't know, we could get part of the meeting group, maybe want to be a kind of an advisor or person that would sit in, so you don't have to keep going back. They could be here to help guide you. But as I recall, we had a lot, and we have a lot of tech savvy people on this board when we started this. So it might be only one or two of them left. And which had a bigger vision probably than we did because they dealt with that kind of stuff. So now it's coming right now to where the rubber hits the road. So looking at that aspect, that's why I asked to have somebody from them, if a subgroup's gonna meet, that they can be there, so you don't keep going back to them. That's part of their advising us or whatever, guiding us or what, if that's possible, I don't know.
So I think what might sound the best is for everyone who wasn't here to view the recording. And then once everyone's on the same page as to what it is, I will have an answer about time commitment. I will say it's probably not going to be once a month for 2 hours. What's this for? From Durham. So I'm saying to figure out who's going to be part of that committee or ad hoc committee to kind of take this forward. But obviously knowing that the committees, subcommittees are going to all do pieces of it, but there needs to be like one group that's going to basically like lead it based off of my understanding.
I think that's a good step to start with.
Does that work?
Establishing?
So what, I'm sorry, I didn't follow what you said about time commitment. You just talking about it serving on that ad hoc committee? Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So is anybody in this room interested in that? We'll start
I'm
here.
interested.
Dion? Okay.
I'll be there. So sorry.
I'm interested. I'm traveling a lot coming up, but I'm interested.
I'm interested. I don't know what.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is there and maybe this came up previously, is there how long are the recordings? Is there some differentiator in there that makes them different from other things going on?
I think we would have to, I think that's when we're starting to build everything, that would be where we figure it out. I'm thinking of like a meeting, it could probably be an hour, right? And everyone gets a chance to answer a couple questions, or maybe it's shorter than that. But I don't think we want to get into the planning part yet until we get those workshops and like talk to Cortico on like how the other conversations were structured and how long they were and how far apart they were. And
I
all
guess,
that.
yeah, I mean, I can appreciate that. I just am trying to understand, like, there are a number of different ways to capture community narratives, right? And so if we have this one tool that we're working with and we're trying to figure out how to use it, is it theme-based, is it open-ended in terms of how we're going to structure questions or surveys, questionnaires, whatever. I'm just trying to get an understanding of like a better understanding of what we have in order to understand how it's different than some other things and how it can be used to help, like she was saying, fill a gap as opposed to be duplicative, because the city is already, it has a number of different efforts going on even right now. And so it sounds like we have a kind of we have a unique opportunity, but we don't have something like, we know we're doing the comprehensive plan, right? We know we're doing this other plan. We know we're working on this other policy thing. Like, so if we're still trying to put it together, like what it's gonna look like, what the purpose, like we know we want to get, we know we want to share the value of having this type of narrative, but what is it? I'm just trying to figure out what we have so I can understand it in the broader context of all the other things that are going on and how people are collecting information and how this how we can begin to think of it as a differentiator that adds value.
Sure.
So that's what I was asking.
I can help answer that question after this meeting. I can stay a couple minutes afterwards and answer that.
And I'll say shortly, I think I understand what you're saying. I think one of the things that we have is a blank slate. And so, and some insight into what is happening so that we can structure what we're doing differently to make it not as repetitive or duplicative of other things. I don't think that our outcome is going to be duplicative. I think it is going to be something that is like specialized, more honed in, more intimate, more organic, more personable, and more usable in different manners, like not just for comprehensive plan or not just for one certain thing. I think it is going to be something that can be used across different boards. But I think the benefit of not having like our structure right now is that we can look at everything and say, okay, they're already doing this, and this, but this specific thing is not happening that would create or facilitate a good conversation, or with this group of people, like you mentioned, in like this area. And I think we have the leeway to do that, whereas some of those other planned project conversations don't have that.
Right. And I will just say, we do have a staff update.
Okay.
Which is why we have Lance here.
Hi, everybody. You want me to go ahead?
And it could maybe help kind of tie in things and explain what this could be used for, or maybe partnership. So if you could share.
Yeah, so I think I know most of you. For those that I don't, my name is Lance Schenholzer. I work in community partnerships, doing mostly education and outreach and leading with our engagement van. A little while ago, Taisha had come to me and was interested in doing some more organic outreach in the community. So I kind of took that and rolled with it a little bit, had some IEP2 training. And one of the things I found interesting during that training was an idea called conversation cafes. For those of you that aren't very familiar with that, they are organic conversations that happen where people usually meet. So coffee shops, bakeries, tap rooms, not just like a city community center. And so these conversation cafes don't have an agenda, and they're usually around 10 people max. And so it's residents expressing their concerns and aspirations, engaging in dialogue with staff. And importantly with these, staff don't have to have the answers. We don't have to reach a consensus on a topic, but the focus is on the dialogue itself. And so I had kind of been researching this idea of conversation cafes, and I had thrown it out to Nadia and Dale. And in that, they were like, that sounds like something the board is kind of working on. And so my question for you guys is, is that something you guys would be interested in partnering on? I love what it sounds like you guys are already doing. And so I guess having heard everything you're doing in Portico, I guess I'm here to say like, I'm available and interested in doing something like this. So if there is that staff support needed, I would be interested in partnering on this as well and doing something.
And just to mention, several of us have participated in these conversation cafes.
World cafes,
What is
which
it?
are different.
They're different than what he's talking about.
They are. So conversation cafes are a lot smaller. It's that 10 people max where everybody kind of goes around for 90 seconds and will express some of their concerns and aspirations. The moderator will typically follow up and ask a question and then you'll go back around. Whereas world cafes, I haven't actually participated in, but I believe they're a lot larger.
Yeah, it can be.
Yeah.
The city's making them.
So
Yeah.
more intimate, more organic.
But the more related to our small group stuff that we're talking about is where we're the level that we want to be at.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to go the larger route.
Right.
But those are the conversations for the experience that some of us had recently of people giving their input and discussing a question, seeing, already the approach that's already being used and at least something to start with,
Yeah.
What's the outcome of these conversation cafes?
It's a great question. I was thinking about that as you were asking about outputs and stuff. Right now, we don't have a particular way that this feedback would be used. So much as that I think similar to what you guys are doing, it kind of highlights some of the concerns and aspirations of the community. But we could definitely collaborate and think maybe there are ways that we could tie this to specific projects. Maybe each session has like a theme, so it's housing stability or something. And then like conversations arise from there, but.
And these are things that like, there's no set topic that's brought to it. It's just whatever you bring to the table yourself.
That was my idea. But this is all flexible. We have not done any external communications about it. This was brainstorming. But that was the idea.
It was like the sample he used with us. That was a broad question that brought in a lot of different things. So you could narrow that question down to bring in something more specific if you wanted. But a broad question like that identified a lot of areas that could lead to more questions. So with, if we look at something that we only have 6 conversations for, then we might want to be,
Well, I don't have the dots connected yet, but something about that and then related to what Councilmember Jones was mentioning about wanting to get the word out about something like 6 Forks, like there is something there, though would be a pointed conversation. There is something to that sort of informal roundtable if you live in this specific district about infrastructure or something. Like there's something about that feels like it could connect that is also in a line with what we want to do in general, which is offer spaces for people to be able to engage in conversations about what's happening around them and where they live. That's all I got. But it feels like there's something there.
What you just said, like, I don't know, I feel like we're talking about what questions we want to ask, like, what do we want to know? What do we want these conversations to go like? Like, do we want to go broad or do we want to go meta and hone in on like, how do you define an engaged community? How do you define a community, right? How do you like ask these people that? And then how could you be engaged with the city like better? Not a bad question like that, but better, I don't know. I'm just
sorry. I'm going to stop us right for a moment. You wait a second. I'm going to stop us right here only because if you leave, we do not have a quorum and we have to vote to get out of this meeting. So I'm going to suspend us at our 3 minutes. If you have something that you want to share in the roundtable, let me know before you leave and I'll send it out in an email. But at this point, since it's 6:27 and we are going to lose our quorum, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Moved by Ramon and a second.
Aye.
By someone else. Anybody else?
Second.
By Suzanne, all those in favor, please say.
Aye.
You missed your chance, Ramon. Thank you.